What if one of the ugliest coins sitting forgotten in an old jar, dusty change pile, or forgotten collection could be worth far more than 5 cents? Imagine picking up a coin that looks like it's been dragged through mud for 60, 70, or even 80 years, scratched, dark, worn out, and almost ready for the chopping block, only to discover that collectors are fighting over examples like it. Today, we're diving into 3 old U.S. nickels that can make ordinary pocket change suddenly look very different. We're talking about the 1920 Buffalo nickel, the 1963 Jefferson nickel, and the 1964 Jefferson nickel. And before you throw an old nickel into a drawer or spend it without looking twice, you need to know what separates an ordinary 5-cent coin from one that might be worth serious money. Because sometimes the ugly, the forgotten, and the beat-up coins are exactly the ones you should stop and examine. And here's where this gets shocking. Condition, mint markings, errors, strike quality, rarity, and collector demand can completely change the story. A coin that looks worthless at first glance may deserve a much closer inspection, while a beautiful-looking coin may turn out to be common. Some high-grade examples of these old nickels have brought surprisingly strong prices at auction, and when a truly scarce variety or exceptional mint state example appears, the price can go vertical. So today, I'm showing you exactly what to look for, whether the coin is dirty, worn, untouched, or looks like it came out of a lake. We'll examine the details collectors notice, the conditions that can make a coin more desirable, and the kind of examples that have brought hundreds or even thousands of dollars. So don't leave yet, because the most important detail may be hiding on a coin you would normally ignore. Your dusty change pile could be hiding something much more interesting than you think. And by the end of this video, you'll know exactly where to look. This is a 1920 Buffalo nickel. At first glance, it may look old, dirty, and almost worthless. You might find one sitting at the bottom of a dusty change pile, inside an inherited coin collection, or forgotten in an old box for decades. But I need you to stop before you dismiss it. This is exactly the kind of old American coin that deserves a closer look. The Buffalo nickel was produced during an important period in U.S. coinage, and after more than a century, most surviving examples have been worn down dramatically. The date can be difficult to read. The buffalo can look almost flat, and the surfaces may show scratches, stains, and damage from decades of circulation. But that doesn't automatically mean the coin has no value. In fact, when the right combination of rarity, condition, strike, and collector demand comes together, the price can move far beyond 5 cents. We're not talking about the ordinary coins you might see every day. We're looking for the examples that make collectors stop, inspect, and sometimes compete for them. Now imagine where a 1920 Buffalo nickel could have been. It could have traveled through pockets, cash registers, stores, banks, dusty drawers, and countless transactions before finally disappearing into someone's collection. For 60, 70, 80, or even more years, a coin like this could have been dragged through everyday life. It may look like trash today, but that wear is also part of its story. And here's the important point. Not every 1920 Buffalo nickel is rare enough to make you rich. Most worn examples are worth only modest amounts. But collectors pay much more attention when the coin survives with strong details and excellent preservation. Look closely at the date on the obverse, the details of the Indian's portrait, the lettering, and especially the condition of the reverse. On the buffalo side, the horn, tail, lettering, and denomination can tell you a lot about how heavily the coin circulated. The sharper those details remain, the more interesting the coin becomes. And then we reach the word every collector loves to hear, mint state. A mint state Buffalo nickel is a completely different story from one that has spent decades bouncing around in pockets. If you discover a 1920 example with unusually sharp details, original-looking surfaces, and very little evidence of circulation, don't clean it, don't polish it, don't try to make it shine. An untouched coin can be far more desirable than a coin that has been aggressively cleaned. Collectors and professional dealers know the difference immediately. A bright, artificially polished coin can actually lose appeal because cleaning can damage the original surface. So if your old nickel looks dark, dusty, or naturally aged, that doesn't mean you should attack it with chemicals. Sometimes the best thing you can do is leave the coin exactly as you found it and have it properly evaluated. But here's where things become really interesting. The 1920 Buffalo nickel is not valuable simply because it is old. Age alone doesn't create a huge price tag. What matters is the combination of scarcity and condition. Buffalo nickels were heavily used, and many were eventually worn almost smooth. That means high-grade survivors can become much harder to locate. This is where auction records enter the story. Exceptional examples of early Buffalo nickels have brought prices dramatically higher than their original 5-cent face value, particularly when they receive strong professional grades. The difference between a heavily circulated coin and a top-quality certified example can be enormous. One coin might be a small collectible, while another can attract serious attention from advanced collectors. That's why you should never judge your 1920 nickel only by how old or dirty it looks. Now take a close look at the date area. Buffalo nickels are famous for having dates that wear away because the date was positioned on a raised portion of the design. After years of circulation, the numerals can become weak or even disappear completely. If your 1920 date is still clearly visible, that's already useful information. Then examine the reverse. Check the buffalo's horn, the lettering, the denomination, and the overall sharpness of the strike. Also look for unusual characteristics rather than assuming every strange-looking mark is an error. Damage from machines, scratches, corrosion, or cleaning can create appearances that look dramatic but don't necessarily add value. Genuine mint errors in important varieties are a different matter. This is why experienced collectors don't simply look at the biggest-looking flaw. They study the entire coin. And now imagine finding one of these coins in the last place you expected. An old jar change, a family collection, a flea market box, or even forgotten drawer. It might be covered in grime. It might look like it has been sitting outside for decades. It might be the coin everyone else ignored. That's exactly why you should look twice. Don't assume that a dirty coin is automatically worthless. And don't assume that an old coin is automatically a fortune. The real treasure is hidden in the details. If your 1920 Buffalo nickel has unusually strong preservation, a clear date, attractive original surfaces, and characteristics that stand out from typical circulated examples, it could deserve professional attention. And if it turns out to be an exceptional specimen, that's when the price can become a completely different conversation. Expert dealers and serious collectors can pay substantial premiums for coins that are genuinely scarce and desirable. So before you spend that old 5-cent coin, put it under good light and examine it carefully. Look at the date. Study the portrait. Turn it over and inspect the buffalo. Check the lettering and the amount of detail remaining. Most importantly, do not clean it just because it looks old. Remember, we're searching for the ugly, the forgotten, the beat-up coins, but we're also searching for the unusually well-preserved survivors hiding among them. A 1920 Buffalo nickel won't automatically make you rich, but the right example can be worth dramatically more than its 5-cent face value. And that's the shocking part of old U.S. coin collecting. Sometimes a coin that looks like nothing can become something collectors seriously want. So if you got one sitting in a dusty change pile right now, don't throw it away. Take a second look, because you might be holding more history and potentially more money than you ever imagined. This is a 1963 Jefferson Nickel, and if you found one today, your first reaction might be simple. It's only 5 cents. But I want you to stop right there. Before you throw it back into your pocket change, drop it into a jar, or assume it is worthless, look at it carefully. This coin is now more than 6 decades old, and millions of coins from this era have been spent, circulated, damaged, lost, or simply disappeared from collections. That means the surviving coins can exist in dramatically different conditions. Some look like they've been dragged through mud for 60 years, while others can still show surprisingly sharp details. And that difference matters. The 1963 Jefferson Nickel isn't automatically a fortune, but certain high-quality, unusual, or error examples can attract serious collector attention. So today, we're going beyond a 5-cent face value and looking for the details that could make one of these old nickels worth much more money. Now think about the journey this little nickel could have taken. It entered circulation during the early 1960s, when 5 cents could actually buy something useful. From there, it could have passed through countless hands, cash registers, vending machines, banks, and stores. Decades later, you could find it buried inside a dusty change pile without even realizing what you're looking at. Most heavily circulated 1963 Jefferson nickels are not rare treasures, And we need to be completely honest about that. Age alone does not make a coin valuable. But collectors don't judge coins only by their age. They examine condition, strike quality, mint marks, errors, varieties, and overall preservation. If your 1963 nickel has been protected from circulation and still has strong original details, the story changes. A coin that looks ordinary at first can become much more interesting when it survives in exceptional condition, and this is where mint state condition becomes extremely important. Imagine two 1963 Jefferson Nickels sitting next to each other. One has scratches across the surface, flattened lettering, dull details, and obvious signs of decades of circulation. The other has sharp design elements, attractive original surfaces, and very little evidence of wear. They may have the same date, but they aren't necessarily worth the same amount. That's one of the biggest lessons in coin collecting. A high-grade survivor can command a premium because so many coins from the original production were eventually worn down. If you ever find a 1963 nickel that looks unusually untouched, don't rush to clean it. Don't polish it. Don't use chemicals to make it shiny. Original surfaces can be extremely important, and improper cleaning can hurt a coin's collector appeal. Now turn that nickel over and start studying the details. Look around the Monticello building. Examine the lettering, check the steps, and inspect the overall sharpness of the reverse design. Then return to the obverse and study Jefferson's portrait and the inscriptions. You should also check the mint mark because the location and type of mint production can help identify exactly what you're holding. But here's another warning. Not every strange mark is a valuable error. A scratch caused by circulation is not the same thing as a genuine mint-made error. Damage from machines, bags, other coins, corrosion, and cleaning can create unusual shapes that look exciting under magnification. Serious collectors know the difference. That's why the most valuable discoveries aren't simply coins with the biggest looking damage. They're coins with legitimate characteristics that can be authenticated and supported by the evidence. And now let's talk about the money, because this is where things can get shocking. A normal circulated 1963 Jefferson nickel generally isn't going to turn your pocket change into a fortune. But exceptional specimens can be a completely different story. Auction results for top-quality Jefferson nickels show why condition matters so much. When a coin reaches a very high professional grade, the price can rise dramatically compared with a worn example. Add a recognized error or another genuinely desirable characteristic, and collectors may become even more interested. That's when the phrase, price goes vertical, starts making sense. You're no longer talking about the ordinary 5-cent coin. You're talking about a scarce collectible that could attract competition from people searching for the finest examples available. Here's something else that makes this hunt exciting. The coin doesn't have to look perfect when you first find it. Maybe it's dirty. Maybe it's dark. Maybe it has been sitting inside an old coffee can for decades. Maybe it looks like trash. Don't confuse dirt with damage, and don't confuse ugliness with worthlessness. At the same time, don't make the opposite mistake and assume every dirty 1963 nickel is valuable. The goal is to investigate, not to imagine a fortune. Look for original surfaces, strong details, unusual mint-made characteristics, and excellent preservation. If the coin appears especially sharp and untouched, consider having it examined by a reputable coin professional or grading service before making any decisions. A professional evaluation can tell you much more than simply staring at the coin and guessing its value. So here's your challenge. Go through those old dusty change piles. Check the forgotten jars. Look through inherited collections. Examine the nickels that everyone else ignores. When you see a 1963 Jefferson nickel, don't immediately spend it just because the denomination says 5 cents. Turn it over. Look closely. Check the details. Look for unusual characteristics. And most importantly, protect the coin from unnecessary cleaning or damage. Most examples won't be worth thousands, and that's the honest truth. But the excitement of coin collecting comes from finding the exception. Somewhere among millions of ordinary coins, unusual survivors and genuine errors can still command serious attention. And that's why this old 5-cent coin deserves one more look before it disappears back into circulation. Because sometimes the coin everyone calls just a nickel is the coin you should have stopped to examine. This is a 1964 Jefferson nickel, and I need you to stop before you dismiss it as just another 5-cent coin. This little piece of American history has been sitting through more than 6 decades of change, circulation, forgotten drawers, dusty jars, and old collections. Some examples look absolutely terrible today. Dark, scratched, worn, and almost like they were dragged through mud for 60 years. But here's where this gets interesting. The date alone doesn't make a 1964 nickel valuable. What matters is what you're actually holding. Condition, mint mark, strike, errors, varieties, and preservation can completely change the story. And if you happen to discover an exceptional example, you could be looking at a coin worth far more than the 5 cents printed into its history. So before you spend one, let's take a serious look at what collectors are searching for. The year 1964 is especially interesting in Jefferson nickel history because the U.S. Mint produced an enormous number of nickels during this period. That means most ordinary circulated examples aren't rare treasures. But enormous production numbers don't mean every surviving coin is identical. Think about what happened after these coins left the mint. Millions were thrown into pockets, dropped onto sidewalks, passed through vending machines, scraped against other coins, and eventually forgotten. Others were protected in collections and survived with much sharper details. After 60-plus years, those differences can become extremely important. A heavily worn coin may be worth only a small amount above face value, while an unusually well-preserved example can attract collectors searching for high-grade coins. That's why you can't simply say, "It's old, so it must be valuable." You have to inspect it. Now look carefully at the condition. A truly high-grade Jefferson nickel can look dramatically different from the average example. Check Jefferson's portrait for signs of wear. Examine the fields around the design for scratches and contact marks. Then flip the coin and study Monticello. Look closely at the building, lettering, and especially the steps. Sharp details can tell you that the coin may have experienced less circulation than the average example. And if you discover a coin that looks almost untouched, don't start polishing it. This is extremely important. A collector may prefer an original, naturally preserved surface over a coin that has been chemically cleaned to look shiny. So if your old nickel is dirty, leave it alone until you know what you're dealing with. Sometimes the best decision you can make is simply not touching it. Now comes another detail that can separate an ordinary nickel from a much more interesting one: the mint mark and possible varieties or errors. Examine the area around the mint mark carefully and compare what you see with reliable references or professional opinions. Then inspect the entire coin for unusual mint-made characteristics. A genuine double design, off-center strike, wrong planchet, or another authenticated mint error can be much more significant than ordinary damage. But don't let every scratch fool you. A coin can pick up strange-looking marks after leaving the mint, and those marks don't automatically create value. This is where experienced collectors have an advantage. They know that a valuable error must generally be something created during the minting process, not simply something that happened to the coin later. And now let's talk about the part everybody wants to hear: the money. Some 1964 Jefferson nickels have brought impressive prices when they are exceptional, particularly in very high grades or when they possess recognized varieties or errors. But don't expect every 1964 nickel to suddenly be worth thousands. The ordinary worn coin is still an ordinary worn coin. The serious money is generally reserved for coins with something genuinely special about them: exceptional preservation, a scarce recognized variety, or a legitimate mint error. This is where auction results can become fascinating. A common-looking nickel can remain inexpensive, while a certified coin with extraordinary characteristics can attract serious competition. That's when the price can move dramatically upward. Collectors aren't simply paying for the date. They're paying for rarity, quality, and desirability. Now imagine finding one in the most unexpected place. You're cleaning out an old drawer and discover a pile of nickels. Most are dull. Some are scratched. One looks like it came out of a lake. Another looks like it has been forgotten for decades. And sitting among them is a 1964 Jefferson nickel with unusually sharp details. That's the moment you don't want to make a mistake. Don't clean it. Don't scratch the surface trying to test it. Don't throw it back into circulation. Put it somewhere safe and examine it under good lighting. Look for the strongest details. Check the mint mark. inspect the surfaces, and compare it with known examples. If something truly unusual catches your eye, professional authentication can be the next step. Expert dealers will pay serious money for genuinely desirable coins, but they won't pay serious money for a coin simply because someone claims it's rare. So here's what I want you to remember when you find a 1964 Jefferson nickel. Most aren't going to make you rich, and that's exactly why you need to know what separates the ordinary from the extraordinary. Check the condition. Check the mint mark. Study Monticello. Look for strong details and legitimate mint-made errors or varieties. Watch for signs of cleaning and damage. And never assume that a dirty old coin is worthless simply because it looks terrible. The ugly, forgotten, beat-up coins are often the ones people overlook. And coin collecting is all about knowing which ones deserve a second look. Your 5-cent coin may still be just 5 cents, but an exceptional 1964 Jefferson nickel can tell a very different story. So before you spend that old nickel, turn it over, inspect it carefully, and don't ignore the details. Because the difference between an ordinary coin and a serious collectible can sometimes be hiding in a detail smaller than your fingernail.